My name is Maria, and I'm 33 years old. The day I heard my own family call me a burden was the day something inside me broke. I wish I could say that moment came out of nowhere, that it was a misunderstanding or a bad joke, but deep down, I had seen it coming for years. I just never expected to hear it out loud, especially not from the people who were supposed to love me most. It all started after my mother passed away. She had been the glue that held our family together. My father, once a proud, quiet man, started to fade after she was gone. I moved back into the family home to help take care of him because he didn't want to live in a nursing facility, and I couldn't bear the thought of him being alone. At that time I had just lost my job, so moving back home made sense, or at least that's what I told myself. Living with my father again brought back memories of childhood warmth, the smell of coffee in the mornings, the old swing set in the backyard, but it also came with the cold reality of adulthood. My sisters, Adriana and June, weren't happy I had come back. Adriana, the oldest, was successful, always dressed in pressed suits and pearls. June, the youngest, lived nearby with her husband and loved to remind everyone of her perfect family. I, apparently, was the only one who hadn't figured out how to be an adult. At first, they pretended to be kind. They'd visit once or twice a week, bringing groceries or flowers, saying they were checking on Dad. But the comments started slipping through like cracks in a wall. "You're still looking for a job?" Adriana would ask with that fake sympathy that made me want to disappear. "You've always had such potential," June would add, pausing just long enough for the insult to sting. I told myself they didn't mean it. That grief made people cruel. But one night, during dinner, it all came out. We were sitting around the table, Dad silent, his eyes tired, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to eat. Adriana had brought some expensive wine, and June was scrolling on her phone between bites. Adriana sighed loudly. "So, Maria, what's your plan? You've been here almost a year. Still no job? No savings? I mean, Dad can't support you forever." Before I could answer, June laughed. "Honestly, Addie, she's always been like that. Remember how Mom used to say Maria was a dreamer? Guess she was right." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say something, anything, but he just kept staring at his plate. The silence from him was worse than their words. "I'm not a burden," I said quietly. "I'm taking care of him because you two barely visit." Adriana set her glass down, her voice sharp. "We visit enough. And don't turn this around, Maria. You're living here rent-free. Let's be honest, if you weren't family, you'd be called exactly what you are. A burden." I felt my stomach twist, my throat close up. The word echoed in my head, repeating like a curse. Burden. I pushed back my chair and stood up, my legs trembling. June snorted softly, muttering something like, "There she goes again, dramatic as always." I wanted to scream. Instead, I went upstairs and locked myself in my old bedroom, the one with fading posters and a creaky bed that smelled like the past. I sat on the floor and let the tears fall silently. They thought I was weak. They thought I had nothing to offer. Maybe they were right. Hours passed. I could hear them downstairs laughing, cleaning up, talking to Dad as if nothing had happened. Their laughter bled through the walls until it was just me, the sound of my heartbeat, and a single truth that hurt more than anything else. I didn't belong in my own home anymore. That night, I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker against the old oak tree. I whispered to myself that I would leave soon, that I would get a job, any job, and never need them again. I'd prove to them I wasn't a burden. But when I went downstairs later to check on Dad, I saw him sitting alone in the dark. His eyes met mine, tired and heavy, but he didn't say a word. He just gave me a faint, guilty smile, and I realized something. Maybe he agreed with them. That realization broke something in me that couldn't be fixed. I went to bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my life, 33 years old, no job, no savings, living in a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. I thought about my mother and how she'd tell me to be patient, to trust in kindness. But kindness had only left me empty. I promised myself that night I'd change everything, that I'd rebuild from scratch, even if it meant being completely alone. I'd rather be lonely than unwanted. Still, as I fell asleep, the word burden kept echoing in my head like an accusation I couldn't escape. That night, I decided to disappear from their lives, but fate had other plans. I thought finding love would be my way out, but it only chained me further. After that night, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't rely on anyone again. But life has a strange sense of humor. The very next month, I landed a part-time job at a local cafe downtown. It wasn't glamorous cleaning tables, refilling coffee, pretending to smile, but for the first time in a long time, I was earning my own money. I was proud, even if it was just a few dollars an hour. That's where I met Nathan. He was a regular customer, always sitting in the corner booth with his laptop and that warm, confident grin. He started small. "You make the best cappuccino in town." Or, "You've got a calming presence, you know that?" I'd laugh it off, but after weeks of seeing him, I began to look forward to his visits. One evening, he waited for me outside after my shift. "Let me walk you home," he said. I hesitated but agreed. Conversation came easy with him. He asked about my dreams, my family, my favorite books. He listened like every word mattered. I hadn't felt seen like that in years. Soon, we started dating. He worked as a web designer, or so he told me. And he always had big plans, new projects, big clients, promises of travel. I wanted to believe in those dreams. He made me feel like I could start over, like my family's cruelty was just a chapter I could leave behind. When I finally saved enough to rent a small studio apartment, Nathan helped me move. He brought groceries, fixed the leaky faucet, left his toothbrush by the sink. It felt safe, maybe too safe, because in that safety, I started losing parts of myself again. It started small questions like, "Do you really have to work tonight?" Or, "I just don't like you talking to that guy at the cafe." I thought it was jealousy, maybe affection. But then it became, "Why do you need a job if I can take care of you?" One night, he grabbed my phone because I didn't answer a message quickly enough. He said, "If you've got nothing to hide, why do you care?" I brushed it off as stress, but I should have known better. His charm had a shadow. Then, when I told him I wanted to apply for an office job, he frowned. "You're not ready for that kind of pressure, Maria. You've been through too much." The words sounded caring, but they caged me. Months passed, and Nathan lost his job. Suddenly, the man who wanted to take care of me needed me to take care of him. I covered rent, groceries, even his phone bill. My savings disappeared faster than I could count them. When I brought it up, he'd say, "We're partners, right? It's our money." One morning, I checked my bank account and saw a withdrawal. I didn't make nearly everything I had left. Nathan claimed it was for an emergency loan to a friend, but when I asked for proof, he exploded. "You don't trust me? After everything I've done for you?" That argument changed everything. I realized how eerily familiar it felt being dependent, being silenced, feeling small in someone else's presence. It was just like being home again, only this time the walls were different. That night, I packed my bag quietly while Nathan slept. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that I'd done it again, given too much to someone who saw my kindness as weakness. I left my key on the counter and walked out into the cold. For the first time in years, I had no one waiting for me, no plan, and no safety net. But as I stood under that flickering streetlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. I found a room for rent above a small law firm downtown. It was tiny, barely enough space for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. I worked mornings at a cleaning company and evenings at the cafe again. The exhaustion was brutal, but it was the kind of tired that comes with pride, not shame. Slowly, I started saving again. I cut contact with Nathan completely. He tried calling at first, begging, apologizing, threatening, but I blocked his number and deleted every photo we ever took. Each night before bed, I'd look in the mirror and tell myself, "You're not a burden. You're a survivor." The words didn't always feel true, but saying them gave me strength. I even started volunteering at the front desk of the law firm below my apartment on weekends. The owner, Miss Godwin, was a sharp, kind woman in her 50s. She noticed my dedication and began teaching me basic clerical tasks. Sometimes, she'd talk about estate law, explaining how people leave behind more than just property when they die. They leave behind truth, secrets, regrets. I didn't realize then how important those words would become. It was during one of those quiet evenings, while filing old paperwork, that I found a strange comfort in legal documents and the idea of order, justice, final words that couldn't changed once signed. Maybe that's why I stayed so late that night, lost in thought. I didn't know it yet, but every lesson I was learning, every document I touched, every will I helped organize, was preparing me for something far bigger than I could imagine. When I caught him lying about where my savings went, I realized I was alone again, but this time, I wouldn't stay weak. The night I packed my things, I swore I'd never need anyone again. When I left Nathan, I had only a suitcase, $150 in cash, and a heart that felt like a cracked vase barely holding together but still standing. I found a small studio apartment above a bakery downtown. It smelled constantly of bread and sugar, which was oddly comforting. The place had thin walls, peeling paint, and a heater that groaned like an old man. For the first time in years, no one told me where to go, what to do, or how much I owed them for existing. The first few weeks were chaos. I juggled 2 jobs, mornings at the cleaning company and evenings assisting at the law firm downstairs. I barely slept, living off instant noodles and black coffee, but exhaustion felt better than dependency. When I scrubbed floors, I reminded myself that this was temporary. When my hands ached from typing invoices, I reminded myself that pain was proof I was rebuilding. Miss Godwin, my boss at the firm, started noticing my effort. "You work harder than people twice your pay grade," she said one evening while we were closing up. I smiled shyly and told her I didn't mind. Work gave me purpose, something I hadn't had in a long time. Over time, she began to trust me with more tasks. Filing documents, organizing cases, even proofreading contracts. That's how I stumbled into my fascination with estate law. I loved how detailed everything was, every signature mattered, every word held weight. There was power in paperwork, power in clarity. Maybe I loved it because I had lived so long in my life. Confusion. After work, I'd often stay late to study. Miss Godwin didn't know, but I'd use the firm's old law textbooks and case archives to teach myself. I learned what wills were, how inheritance worked, and how notarization made final words legally untouchable. Reading about families fighting over estates felt strangely close to home: greed, silence, betrayal. Stories that weren't so different from my own. I still thought about my father often. I hadn't spoken to him since I left home. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, especially on quiet nights. Sometimes, I'd start writing a letter to him but stop midway, unsure what to say. Did he miss me? Did he even notice I was gone? I didn't know. One Sunday morning, I passed by the market near our old neighborhood. I thought about stopping by the house, just to see him from afar, but fear held me back. I wasn't ready to face the sisters who had called me worthless. I wasn't ready to hear that I'd been forgotten. Instead, I focused on moving forward. My savings slowly grew. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet, how to cook something other than noodles, how to enjoy silence. I found joy in the smallest things: waking up to sunlight through the cracked blinds, hearing laughter from the bakery below, feeling my own independence grow like a heartbeat I could finally hear. Months turned into a year. One evening, while closing the office, Miss Godwin called me into her room. "Maria," she said, "you ever think about becoming a paralegal? You've got a mind for this." Her words stunned me. No one had ever said something like that before, not without a trace of mockery. I told her I couldn't afford school, but she smiled and said, "There are scholarships for people who work hard. Look into it." That night, I walked home feeling something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Real, raw pride. I sat on my little bed, looked around my half-empty room, and whispered, "You're doing it, Maria. You're really doing it." For months, I kept my head down and worked. I barely checked social media, but sometimes, curiosity won. My sisters' lives looked picture-perfect online: Adriana hosting dinner parties, June posting family photos by the pool. My father appeared in one of their posts, sitting in his wheelchair, thinner than I remembered. My stomach tightened. He looked so fragile. I hovered over the comment box, wanting to write something: "I miss you, Dad." But I didn't. Instead, I closed the app and cried silently in the dark. I told myself he was being taken care of. That was what mattered. Still, that image of him wouldn't leave my mind. A few days later, while I was wiping down desks after hours, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello, is this Mireya Solano?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is she," I said cautiously. "This is Mr. Levin. I'm the notary for your family. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." I froze. The air felt heavy. The sound of my heartbeat drowned out his next words. All I heard clearly were the ones that changed everything. "Your father passed away yesterday." The world seemed to tilt. I sank into the nearest chair, gripping the phone like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. I hadn't said goodbye. Mr. Levin continued, his tone gentle. Your sisters have been notified. The funeral is scheduled for this Friday. I understand this must be difficult. Difficult didn't even begin to describe it. I thanked him and hung up, then sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The same wall I'd promised myself I'd never cry against again. But I did. I cried until my body shook. Until one morning, a call from the family lawyer shattered my fragile peace. When the notary called my name, I thought it was a prank. The morning after that call, I woke up numb. Grief comes in the waves. But that day, it felt like drowning in still water, no sound, no air, just the crushing weight of guilt. I kept replaying his voice in my head, my father's tired smile the last time I saw him, and all the things I never said. I took a few days off from work to prepare for the funeral. Miss Godwin was kind about it. She didn't ask questions, just told me to take whatever time I needed. I appreciated her silence. There were no words that could make sense of the mix of sorrow and shame swirling inside me. The funeral was held at Street Bartholomew's, the old church near our childhood home. When I arrived, I almost turned back. Adriana and June were at the entrance, dressed in black, both looking flawless like grief was a performance they'd rehearsed. Their eyes met mine, cold and expressionless. Mireya, Adriana said flatly, as if testing the word. Didn't expect you to come. I swallowed hard. He was my father too. June gave a short, sharp laugh. Sure. Now you remember. I ignored her and walked past, forcing my legs to keep moving. Inside, the smell of incense and lilies made my stomach twist. My father's coffin sat at the front, surrounded by candles. I sat in the back pew, feeling like a stranger at my own father's farewell. During the service, my sisters cried in turns loud, practiced sobs that felt hollow to me. I cried too, but quietly. Not for the man they mourned publicly, but for the one I'd lost privately long before he died. After the ceremony, I stayed behind when everyone left. I touched the edge of his casket and whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. I should have been here. I should have said goodbye. The silence that followed felt both forgiving and empty. As I stepped outside, Mr. Levin, the family lawyer, approached me. He was a short, neat man in his 60s, wearing round glasses and a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Solano, he said softly, your father left instructions for a private will reading next week. All three of you are requested to attend. All three? I repeated, blinking. Yes. Wednesday at 10, at my office downtown. I nodded slowly, unsure what to think. I didn't expect anything from my father's will. If anything, I assumed he had left everything to my sisters. After all, they were the ones who stayed, or at least, that's what I believed. When I got home that night, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept spiraling. What did he leave behind? Did he mention me at all? Did he still think of me as his disappointment? The week crawled by. I worked long hours just to stay distracted. Still, anxiety simmered beneath the surface. The night before the will reading, I found myself staring at an old photo me as a child, sitting on my father's shoulders, both of us laughing. I barely recognized that girl. Wednesday came too soon. I arrived at Mr. Levin's office early. The waiting room was sleek, lined with polished wood and leather chairs. Adriana and June arrived together, perfectly dressed as always. Adriana didn't even look at me. June gave a tight smile that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Mr. Levin invited us in. His office smelled faintly of paper and ink, serious, old-fashioned. A large folder sat on the desk, sealed with a notary stamp. My stomach turned as I sat down. He began with the formalities, reading the document's date and legal acknowledgments. Adriana looked impatient, tapping her manicured nails on the armrest. June crossed her arms, whispering under her breath. Then, Mr. Levin cleared his throat. The last will and testament of Mr. Hector Solano. I held my breath. He read the opening lines, a few words about his gratitude to his family, about the importance of legacy and love. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe it would be simple, maybe he had forgiven us all. But then, something changed in Mr. Levin's expression. He paused mid-sentence, eyes flicking toward Adriana and June, then toward me. To my daughters, Adriana Solano and June Solano, he began, then hesitated. I leave my love and memories. They have both been provided for in life, and I wish them peace. Adriana frowned. What? June leaned forward. That's it? Mr. Levin looked apologetic. Your father updated this will 3 months ago. The remainder of his estate, including the house, business shares, and savings, has been left solely to Maria Solano. The room went silent. I couldn't breathe. I thought I'd misheard him. Adriana's face turned red, her eyes narrowing like a blade. This is some kind of mistake, she snapped. You expect me to believe he'd cut us out completely? Impossible. Mr. Levin shook his head. It's all properly notarized and witnessed. Your father was very clear. June's jaw trembled. She must have tricked him, she said, pointing at me. She must have made him do this. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I was just as stunned as they were. I hadn't spoken to my father in nearly a year. I hadn't even known he was sick enough to be writing wills. Adriana stood, pacing furiously. I want to see the document myself. Mr. Levin slid a copy toward her. The ink was bold, the signature unmistakably our father's. 2 witness signatures followed below. It was real. She threw the papers down. This is unbelievable. She doesn't deserve a cent. She's been nothing but a— Enough, Mr. Levin interrupted sharply. There's also a letter your father asked me to read aloud. He wanted this to be heard together. He pulled out a sealed envelope, broke the wax, and unfolded a single page. My heart raced. And when Mr. Levin looked at me and said, Your father left special instructions, my heart stopped. We sat in that polished room. 3 sisters, but only 2 names were called. When Mr. Levin unfolded the letter, the air in the office turned thick. Even the clock ticking on the wall seemed too loud. Adriana crossed her arms, glaring at me like she could burn a hole through my skin. June sat stiff beside her, her fingers trembling against her lap. I felt like a child again, waiting to be scolded for something I didn't do. Mr. Levin adjusted his glasses and began reading. To my daughters, Adriana, June, and Maria, his voice softened as he continued. This letter is not written to divide you, though it may feel that way. It's written because I made too many mistakes when your mother died, mistakes I can no longer fix in person. My throat tightened. I could picture my father's handwriting, the heavy pen strokes he used, the way his letters leaned slightly to the right. I have loved you all differently, Mr. Levin read on, but not equally. Adriana and June, you have lived comfortably because of me. Every debt, every mistake I covered. Every time you needed help, I gave it, often at Maria's expense. I saw her carry blame she did not deserve. I saw her called names I should have defended her from. I stayed silent when she was mocked, and I regret that silence until my last breath. Adriana shot up from her seat. This is ridiculous, she snapped. He must have been confused. Dad wasn't well. You can't take this seriously. Sit down, Adriana, Mr. Levin said calmly. Your father's mind was sound. The will and letter were verified by 2 witnesses and a medical evaluation confirming his mental clarity. June's face turned pale. He wrote that? She whispered. Mr. Levin nodded and continued. Maria, you reminded me of your mother, patient, kind, too forgiving. You never demanded anything, and perhaps that's why I failed you the most. I thought strength came from control, but now I know it comes from humility. You showed me that. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. Everything I own, Mr. Levin read slowly, including the house, the business, and all remaining savings, is to go to Maria. My only request is that she decides what peace looks like for this family. If she chooses to forgive, let it be her choice. If she chooses to walk away, let her go in peace. Silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Adriana slammed her fist on the desk. This is a setup. You all think I'll just sit here and accept that some martyr gets everything because she played the victim for years? Adriana, June murmured, but she didn't finish. No, Adriana shouted, pointing at me. She abandoned him. We were here, taking care of him, running errands, handling everything while she ran off to live her sad little life. And this is her reward? I swallowed hard. You didn't take care of him. You visited. There's a difference. Her eyes narrowed like daggers. You ungrateful, Mr. Levin raised his hand. Ladies, enough. This conversation will not turn violent. The will is final. June wiped at her eyes. Can't we contest it? You can try, Mr. Levin said, but your father made sure you couldn't. He updated this document 3 months ago and included a no contest clause. If either of you challenge it in court, your share, however symbolic, will be forfeited entirely. Adriana's face twisted in rage. So he knew we'd fight. He planned this. Perhaps, Mr. Levin replied. He hoped you wouldn't. The silence that followed was unbearable. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want their money, their house. All I ever wanted was my father's respect, and now that I finally had it, he was gone. Adriana grabbed her purse and stood. This isn't over. You'll regret this, Mireya. I'll make sure of it. June hesitated, her lip trembling. Addie, don't you dare take her side, Adriana hissed before storming out, the door slamming behind her so hard the windows rattled. June stayed behind for a few seconds, her eyes glistening. Did you know about this? She asked softly. I shook my head. No, I swear I didn't. She nodded weakly, then whispered. He loved you, you know. I think we all just pretended not to see it. Then she walked out, leaving me and Mr. Levin alone. I sat there staring at the letter. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would he give everything to me? Mr. Levin folded the papers carefully. Because he saw who you became, Mireya. You changed, and he noticed. He said you reminded him of who your mother wanted him to be: fair, gentle, and strong. His words sank deep into my heart. I wiped my tears and nodded, unsure whether to feel grateful or devastated. What am I supposed to do now? Mr. Levin sighed. Grieve first. The rest will come later. He trusted you with this for a reason. I stood to leave, the weight of my father's decision pressing down on my shoulders. As I reached the door, Mr. Levin spoke again. There's one more thing, he said. Your father left a note just for you. Would you like to read it now or later? I hesitated. Later, I said softly. I'm not ready yet. He nodded, handing me the sealed envelope. I tucked it into my bag, afraid to open it, afraid of what words might lie inside, afraid they'd break me all over again. When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt foreign. The city noise blurred into a hum as I walked aimlessly down the street, clutching my bag close to my chest. People passed by, laughing, talking, living their ordinary lives. I wondered what they'd think if they knew that just hours ago, my entire world had shifted, that everything I thought I'd lost had suddenly been handed to me, not as a gift, but as a test. And when Mr. Levin read my father's final note, aloud, everything made sense. My father's voice lived in that letter, and it was the first time I truly heard him. That night, I sat on my narrow bed in the apartment and stared at the envelope. Mr. Levin had handed me. It felt heavier than paper should. My fingers trembled as I slid a blade along the edge and pulled out the folded page. The handwriting was unmistakable, strong, yet slightly shaky. I took a deep breath and began to read. My dear Mireya, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I wish I could have said these words face to face, but I've always been better with silence than with truth. That silence became my greatest sin. I stopped for a moment, already crying. His words sounded like him, calm, steady, full of quiet regret. I watched you carry the weight of our family's judgment with grace. You were mocked, dismissed, treated as less, and I did nothing. I told myself it was to keep peace, but it was cowardice. Your mother would have never forgiven me for it, and neither should you. I covered my mouth as a sob slipped out. I could almost hear him saying it in his gravelly voice. My tears stained the ink, blurring his next line. You never asked me for anything, yet you gave me everything I didn't deserve: kindness. I saw you grow from a frightened girl into a woman who stood alone with dignity. That strength is why this inheritance is yours. I know money won't heal you, but I hope it gives you choices. The freedom I failed to give you when I was alive. I pressed the paper against my chest, as if I could somehow feel his heartbeat through it. Your sisters may never understand this decision, and they may hate you for it. Do not carry their bitterness. They have lived on comfort. You have lived on courage. The world will test you again, Mireya, and when it does, remember, being underestimated is your greatest power. You are not a burden. You are the legacy I am proud to leave behind. By the time I reached the end, I couldn't breathe through the sobs. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my lips. Thank you, Dad, I whispered into the silence. I forgive you. It wasn't just the words, it was the peace behind them. The acknowledgement I had waited my whole life to hear. My father had seen me, really seen me, even if it took him until his last days to say it. When I finally looked up, the room felt different, lighter, somehow. The anger, the shame, the ache of being unwanted, it all softened into something new. Not joy, not closure exactly, but something closer to acceptance. I spent the next few days in a fog. Adriana and June refused to speak to me. They sent me cold, formal texts about legal verification and proof of authenticity, as if I had written the will myself. Mr. Levin reassured me everything was valid, but I could tell he expected trouble. They won't let this go quietly, he said. Prepare yourself. I didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. The day I went back to my father's house to collect a few of his things, it felt like stepping into a memory. The air still smelled faintly of his cologne, cedarwood, and coffee. Dust lined the furniture, and sunlight cut through the curtains in golden stripes. His reading glasses rested on the side table, as if he'd only stepped out for a moment. I walked through every room slowly, running my fingers along the walls, remembering how he used to hum while fixing things, how he'd pat my head when I'd fall asleep on the couch. I stopped by his study and saw a photo of me from years ago, one I didn't know he'd kept. It was from my high school graduation. I looked awkward, wearing an oversized gown, smiling nervously. On the back, in his handwriting, were 4 words. My daughter, my pride. That broke me all over again. I sat down in his old chair, holding the frame to my chest, and cried until there were no tears left. When I finally looked around the study, I noticed the desk drawers were meticulously organized. Every document labeled, every folder sealed. He had prepared for this, down to the smallest detail. He wanted no chaos after his death, but my sisters had other plans. By the weekend, I started getting messages from mutual relatives. Heard the will was unusual. Adriana's saying she's hiring a lawyer. June's upset, says you manipulated their father. Each message felt like a tiny stab. I ignored them all. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. My father's letter was all the validation I needed. Still, the isolation crept in again, the same loneliness I thought I'd escaped. At night I'd reread his note before bed, the words soothing me like a lullaby. For the first time in years, I felt both orphaned and loved. It was a strange contradiction to lose everything and gain something deeper in the same breath. When I met with Mr. Levin again to finalize the legal transfer, he smiled kindly at me. Your father was proud of you, Maria, he said. He told me so more than once. I blinked back tears. He never said it out loud. Mr. Levin nodded. Some people show love through actions. His silence wasn't indifference, it was fear. He didn't know how to make peace until it was too late. Maybe he was right. Maybe forgiveness didn't need to come before death, maybe it could still bloom after. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by stacks of legal papers, my father's note resting beside me, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't weak because I cared too much. I was strong because I cared despite everything. And that strength, that quiet endurance he finally saw was my inheritance. And in that moment, I realized their fury was proof I finally mattered. Inheritance doesn't buy peace, it buys enemies wearing your last name. The calm after the will reading lasted barely 3 days. On the 4th, my phone started buzzing non-stop, unknown numbers, private calls, messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. At first I ignored them. Then curiosity got the better of me. One message said, "Your sisters are saying you tricked your father. Is that true?" Another read, "Did you really forge the will? Everyone's talking about it." By evening, my name was being dragged across social media. Adriana had posted a long, carefully worded paragraph claiming that I had isolated our father and influenced his mental state to rewrite the will. She didn't mention my name directly, but the implication was obvious. The comments poured in, pity for her, disgust for me. People I'd gone to school with chimed in, saying things like, "She always was a bit off." I didn't even know how they'd found out. June hadn't posted anything, but she didn't defend me either. Silence can be louder than words. That week, I barely slept. I kept replaying every scene from the past few years in my mind, searching for something I'd done wrong. But I hadn't. My father made his own choice. I was simply living with the consequences of it. Still, it hurt, the constant whispers, the judgment. the looks from people who didn't know the truth. The city felt smaller, meaner. Every trip to the grocery store came with stares. Every phone vibration made my chest tighten. I decided to meet Mr. Levin again. When I walked into his office, I could see the concern in his eyes. "They've started spreading stories, haven't they?" he asked. I nodded. "Adriana's telling everyone I forged the will," he sighed. "She's angry. I expected as much, but the document's airtight. She won't get far if she tries to contest it. She might not win," I said softly, "but she'll make sure I don't have peace either." He looked at me sympathetically. "Mireya, peace doesn't come from people like that. It comes from deciding they don't matter anymore." I wanted to believe him. The next week, I moved temporarily into my father's old house, my house now. Though it didn't feel like it. Every corner was heavy with memories. The old piano in the living room, untouched since my mother died. The garden overgrown but still fragrant. I spent days cleaning, fixing, restoring, not because I wanted luxury, but because I needed to heal. Neighbors started stopping by. Some came with condolences, others with curiosity thinly disguised as kindness. "We heard Adriana might be suing," one said with a fake smile. "I hope that's not true." I smiled politely and said, "I'm just trying to honor my father's wishes." Inside, I was trembling. A week later, I received a letter from Adriana's attorney, a formal inquiry requesting copies of the will and my father's medical reports. Mr. Levin took care of it, but the stress ate away at me. Every night I expected to find a new headline, a new rumor, another betrayal. Then, one afternoon, as I was sorting through my father's study, I found a small box tucked behind a shelf of old files. Inside were several journals, each bound in worn leather. My father's handwriting filled every page. At first, I couldn't bring myself to open them. But curiosity and something deeper, maybe longing, made me sit down and start reading. The entries began years before my mother's death and stretched all the way to his final months. What I found inside those pages made my heart ache and burn all at once. He'd written about Adriana's constant requests for money, about June's failed business ventures, about how they'd convinced him to mortgage part of the property years ago. He'd written about guilt for allowing them to take advantage of him, guilt for believing their lies about me. One entry stood out. "Mireya doesn't ask for anything. Maybe that's why she gets nothing. Adriana says she's lazy. June says she's naive. But when they leave, the house feels empty. When she leaves, it feels lonely." Tears blurred my vision as I turned the pages. In one of the last entries, dated just weeks before his death, he'd written, "I've changed my will. I can't undo the years of silence, but I can make sure my last act is one of truth. The ones who took will learn loss. The one who gave will finally have something of her own." I sat there for hours. The journals spread around me like confessions. All the doubts, all the guilt I'd carried, began to fade. My father hadn't been manipulated. He'd made his choice with clear eyes and a heavy heart. When Adriana found out I'd moved into the house, she sent me a furious message. "You think you've won? You'll regret every dollar of it." I didn't reply. For the first time, I didn't need to defend myself. I had proof, not just legal, but emotional, written in my father's own words. Still, I knew her silence wouldn't last. She was a woman who thrived on control, and now she'd lost it. I could feel the storm gathering again, quiet but dangerous. That night, as I locked the door and looked around the house that once rejected me, I made a decision. I would stop hiding. I would stand firm, not just for the inheritance, but for my father's truth. I didn't know that the very next discovery hidden within those journals would change everything I thought I knew about my family. What I read in one of those journals made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. My father's handwriting trembled across the page, hiding decades of silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. The box of journals sat on the desk beside my bed like a living thing, breathing secrets into the dark. I'd already read one cover to cover, but there were at least 5 more, each thicker than the last. I brewed coffee, lit a candle, and started on the next one, the one marked year, 2015. The first few pages were ordinary, notes about bills, repairs, doctor visits. But as I turned the pages, the tone changed. My father's words became heavier, more emotional confessions instead of accounts. Adriana and June visited again today. One entry began. They wanted money to invest in something. I said no. They grew cold. June called me heartless. Adriana said, "You'll regret picking favorites." But I didn't pick anyone. I just wanted peace. The next entries were shorter, fragmented. He wrote about sleepless nights, strange phone calls, and arguments that left him shaking. Then I found a paragraph that made me sit upright. I overheard Adriana on the phone last week. She was talking about handling Maria. I don't know what that means, but it chilled me. She said something about keeping me focused on the right people. I pretended I didn't hear. My heart thudded. I turned the page, my hands trembling. June told me Maria didn't want to visit. Said she called me a burden. I believed her. I even told myself Maria was better off without me. I see now how cruel that was, how much I wanted it to be true because it made the silence easier to bear. I closed the book and pressed my palms against my eyes. All those years I thought my father had chosen them over me. He'd been manipulated, lied to. They had turned him against me. Anger surged in my chest like fire. How could they do that? How could my own sisters twist love into control? I flipped through the remaining pages and found receipts tucked between them, transfers, bank withdrawals, even a property deed. My sisters had drained thousands from his accounts over the years. Each gift or loan was documented. Every lie had a paper trail. I reached for the next journal. It was labeled 2021, The Truth. Inside, my father's handwriting was shaky but determined. I finally saw it. They only come when they want something. I was their wallet, their shield, their silence. Maria came last month, just to bring me soup. She didn't stay long. She said she had work. But for the first time in years, she smiled. She looked free. That night, I rewrote my will. I gasped, rereading that line. That night, I rewrote my will. He had seen me even from a distance. He'd noticed the change. That one act of kindness, something so small, had been enough to shift everything. If she ever doubts why I did it, tell her this. I saw her heart, and I saw their hunger. I couldn't reward greed one more time. I sat there in silence, the candle flickering beside me, the words echoing in my mind. My father hadn't acted out of guilt or confusion. He'd acted out of clarity, the kind that only comes when it's almost too late. As I went through the last few entries, I saw notes about meetings with Mr. Levin. My father had secretly updated the will without telling my sisters, asking the notary to file it quietly. He'd even paid extra for confidentiality. I told Levin not to contact them until after I was gone. One entry read, "I want no more fights while I'm breathing. Let the truth come after me." By the time the sun rose, I had read every journal cover to cover. My eyes were swollen, but my heart was lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own story. I felt like the person my father finally believed I was someone worth protecting. That morning, I called Mr. Levin. "I found journals," I said quietly. "They prove everything, the manipulation, the money, the lies." He sighed. "That explains a lot. I suspected something, but he never said it outright. He was ashamed." "Should I show them to my sisters?" I asked. "Not yet," he said firmly. "Let's document and secure them first. If they decide to contest the will, these journals could be critical evidence." We agreed to meet that Friday. But part of me couldn't wait. I wanted them to see it, to face what they'd done. When Friday came, I walked into Mr. Levin's office with the box of journals. Adriana and June were already there. Adriana's expression was sharp and calculated. June looked nervous, her eyes darting between us. Mr. Levin greeted us politely and gestured for me to sit. "Maria found something that needs to be discussed," he said. I placed the box on the table. Adriana frowned. "What is that?" "Dad's journals," I said, my voice steady. "You might want to hear what he really thought of us." June's face paled. Adriana scoffed. "This again? How convenient. You just happened to find his secret confessions after he's gone?" "Read them," I said simply. "Then talk." She hesitated, then grabbed one of the journals and flipped through the pages. Her face changed as she read, first disbelief, then anger, then something close to fear. She slammed the book shut. "This is manipulation. You planted this." Mr. Levin raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Solano, the handwriting matches your father's, and the entries reference notarized events in my records. These are real." June reached for another journal, her lips trembling as she read. "Addie, he wrote about us," she whispered. "About the money, the lies, everything." Adriana's face twisted. "He was sick." He didn't know what he was writing, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. I looked at them both, two women who had spent their lives believing they could twist reality to their advantage, and for the first time, they looked small, lost. But when they walked in, I realized this confrontation wouldn't end with words. They came dressed like queens, ready to burn me down. The day I confronted my sisters face to face about the truth was the day I finally stopped being afraid of them. Mr. Levin had agreed to host the meeting at his office to keep things civil, but nothing about that day felt civil to me. Adriana arrived first, wearing a black pantsuit sharp enough to cut glass. Her heels clicked across the floor like gunfire. June followed, quieter, avoiding my eyes as she clutched her handbag like a shield. Mr. Levin gestured for us to sit. I placed the box of journals on the table. "Before we start," I said, "I want you both to hear something." I opened one of the journals, the last one, my father's final months, and began to read aloud. Adriana called again today. Said she needed another loan. I told her no. She hung up. June texted later, asking me not to upset her sister. "They think I don't know what they're doing. I do. I just don't have the strength to fight them anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. Adriana's lips curled into a thin smile. "So that's your proof? Scribbles in a notebook?" He was losing his mind. "He wasn't," I said firmly. "Every date in these journals lines up with his bank statements. Every withdrawal, every meeting, every lie you told him, it's all documented." Mr. Levin nodded, sliding a file across the table. "I verified the dates myself. The handwriting matches. The evidence is consistent." June looked between us, her hands trembling. "Addie, we did take money from him," she whispered. "You said it was fine. You said he didn't care." "Shut up, June," Adriana snapped. "No," June said, her voice cracking. "He trusted us, and we took advantage of him. You made me lie to him about Maria. You told me it was for the best." Adriana slammed her hand against the table. "You were happy to take the money too." Mr. Levin raised a hand. "Ladies, please." But Adriana cut him off, turning her rage on me. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Sitting there, pretending you're innocent. You always wanted to be the victim. Well, congratulations, you got what you wanted." I looked at her, really looked at her. The flawless makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes, the panic she was trying so hard to mask. "I didn't want any of this," I said softly. "I just wanted a family that didn't treat me like trash." Adriana scoffed. "You wouldn't understand what it's like to carry responsibility." "Responsibility?" I repeated. "Is that what you call stealing from our father while he was dying?" Her jaw tightened. "You have no idea what he was like toward the end." "I know exactly what he was like," I said. "Because I was there." Adriana, not in person, but in the way he wrote. Every word of his regret, every moment he wished he'd stood up for me. "He saw you. He saw everything." June started crying quietly, covering her face. Adriana stood abruptly, her voice rising. "You think you've won, don't you? You think this money makes you better than us? You're still the same pathetic little girl begging for approval." I took a deep breath. "No, I'm not begging anymore." She froze, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. "I don't want to fight you," I said. "I don't want your apologies, or your respect. I just want you to stop lying to yourselves, and to everyone else." June sniffled. "Addie, maybe we should just stop this. Dad's gone. He made his choice." Adriana glared at her. "Don't you dare take her side." "I'm not taking sides," June whispered. "I'm just tired. I'm so tired." Mr. Levin cleared his throat. "If I may," he said gently. "Your father's wishes were clear. Contesting this will is futile and costly. I suggest we end this now with dignity." Adriana's shoulders slumped for the first time. She stared at me, her eyes burning with resentment, but also something else, grief, maybe. "You'll regret this," she said finally, her voice low. "I don't care what that old man wrote. You'll see what happens when you cross me." She turned on her heel and stormed out, the sound of her heels echoing down the hall until it faded into silence. June sat still for a long moment, then looked up at me. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "I just followed her." "I know," I said quietly. "You always did." "I'm sorry, Maria." I nodded. "You should tell that to him," I whispered. "Not me." June left soon after, her eyes red and swollen. When the door finally closed behind her, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Mr. Levin smiled faintly. You handled that well, he said. I didn't handle it, I replied. I just stopped letting them control the story. He chuckled softly. That's more powerful than you think. As I walked out of the office, the city air felt lighter. The sky above was overcast, but I didn't mind. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being accused, belittled, or blamed. The truth was finally louder than their lies. That night, I stood in front of my father's portrait in the hallway. It's done, I whispered. They know everything now. I waited for the guilt to come, the sadness, the ache of family breaking apart, but instead, all I felt was relief. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was peace. As the door slammed, I felt the weight of generations lifting from my chest. Peace feels strange when you've lived your life fighting for scraps of respect. In the weeks after that confrontation, silence finally replaced chaos. Adriana stopped calling. June sent one hesitant message. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond right away. Forgiveness wasn't a door I could walk through easily, not after decades of being treated like an inconvenience. Still, her message lingered in my mind. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. Either way, I was done letting their words define me. The house became my refuge. Every morning, I opened the windows wide to let the light in. I cleaned every corner, repainted the walls, and filled the rooms with warmth that hadn't existed there in years. My father's spirit seemed to settle into the quiet, peaceful air. I could almost feel him watching as I rebuilt the home he once loved. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was a promise. A promise that the kindness they saw as weakness would be what carried me forward. I began transforming the first floor into something new, a small legal aid space for women struggling like I once had. I talked to Miss Godwin about it, and she offered to help with paperwork and contacts. There's always someone who needs a hand to stand back up, she said. You'd be perfect for this. I named it the Solano Foundation after my father. The irony wasn't lost on me, the man who once stayed silent now giving a voice to others through me. I worked tirelessly for months, painting walls, assembling old furniture, and setting up a simple office space. When I finally opened the doors, I didn't know what to expect. The first woman who walked in was a single mother, trying to get child support from an absent ex. She cried when we helped her file her case. That day, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something that mattered. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, women from nearby neighborhoods began showing up, some with legal issues, some just needing advice or someone to listen. I couldn't fix everything, but I could offer what I never had: patience and respect. At night, I'd sit on the porch, watching the sunset fade behind the trees. The same house that once echoed with contempt now rang with laughter and hope. Sometimes, I imagined my father sitting beside me, proud and quiet, like he used to be. June showed up one evening, unannounced. She looked thinner, more fragile. Her eyes darted around nervously as she stood at the gate. Can I come in? She asked softly. I hesitated but nodded. She stepped inside and looked around the transformed living room. It's beautiful, she whispered. He'd love what you've done. Thank you, I said. For a while, we didn't speak. She finally broke the silence. Adriana's not doing well. She lost her job, her husband left, and she's drowning in debt. She blames you for everything. I sighed. I don't want to hate her, June, but she made her choices. So did I. I know, June said, her voice trembling. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For believing her lies. For calling you names. You didn't deserve that. Her apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. I saw it in her eyes, the same regret I once wished to see in my father's. I nodded slowly. I forgive you, I said. But I can't go back to pretending nothing happened. She smiled weakly. I wouldn't expect you to. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope. Dad's old watch, she said. Adriana gave it to me years ago. I think he'd want you to have it. I held it carefully, the weight of time and forgiveness resting in my palm. Thank you, I whispered. After she left, I sat alone, staring at the watch ticking softly in my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt chosen. The next morning, I visited my father's grave for the first time since the funeral. The cemetery was quiet, bathed in the golden light of dawn. I placed fresh lilies on his headstone and whispered, I kept my promise. I built something from what they broke. As I stood there, a breeze rustled through the trees soft, almost like a sigh. I closed my eyes and imagined it was him, finally at peace. Donations started coming in. I hired 2 interns. The home that once held my pain was now a place of healing not just for me, but for others too. Then one morning, while sorting mail at the front desk, I saw a letter addressed to me with no return name. The handwriting was familiar. When I opened it, I froze. It was from Adriana. Her words were few but sharp. You may have fooled the courts, but you can't erase what you've done. You stole what was ours, and I'll make sure everyone knows it. I stared at the letter for a long time before folding it neatly and placing it in the drawer. There was no anger left in me, only pity. She was still fighting a war that was already over. But something about the tone, the venom behind those words made me uneasy. I could sense that Adriana wasn't finished. And I was right. But one letter in the mailbox reminded me that the past never truly stays buried. They tried to take everything back, even my peace. A month after Adriana's threatening letter arrived, I received an official notice delivered by courier. At first, I thought it was another donation form or a partnership request for the foundation. But when I tore open the envelope and saw the letterhead Hendricks and Lowell Attorneys at Law, my stomach sank. It was a summons. Adriana had filed a lawsuit against me. She was contesting the will after all. Her claim, I had unduly influenced our father during his final months, taking advantage of his fragile emotional and mental state. It was the very thing I'd feared, not because I doubted the truth, but because lies are louder when money is involved. When I called Mr. Levin, his tone was steady but grim. "We expected this, Maria," he said. "She's banking on fear. Don't give her that satisfaction. We have the documents, the journals, the medical evaluations, and the witnesses. She has nothing. She has spite," I murmured. "And that's sometimes enough to ruin someone's life," he sighed. "Then let's make sure it doesn't ruin yours." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and endless questions from lawyers. I had to relive every detail, like of my relationship with my father when I last saw him, what we spoke about, how he seemed. They asked whether I'd ever suggested he rewrite the will. I said no, and I meant it. Every answer felt like standing trial for my own kindness. Meanwhile, Adriana was everywhere. Her lawyer made sure her version of the story reached anyone who would listen: mutual acquaintances, old family friends, even a few local journalists. "Ungrateful daughter manipulates dying father," one headline read. They painted her as the devoted child who'd been betrayed, and me as the schemer who stole everything. June stayed silent, caught between us. When I reached out, she texted only 4 words: "I'm sorry, I can't." The court hearings began in late spring. I wore my father's watch to the first session, gripping it like a lifeline. Adriana sat across from me in the courtroom, looking every bit the grieving martyr. Her expression was calm, almost smug. She didn't even glance my way. Her lawyer started with a speech about family betrayal and a daughter's manipulation of a vulnerable man. Every word stung like acid. Then they brought in witnesses, old neighbors, and acquaintances who said they rarely saw Maria visit in her father's final year. They didn't mention that my father had asked for space, or that my sisters had told me I wasn't wanted there. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and looked straight at the judge. "My father changed his will because he realized who had taken from him and who had stood alone," I said. "He wasn't confused, he wasn't pressured. He made a choice, one he put in writing, notarized, and protected with witnesses." Mr. Levin followed with his own testimony, providing the dates of the legal update, the doctor's assessment, and the video verification of my father signing the will. That last part silenced the courtroom. On the screen, my father's frail face appeared, his voice weak but clear. "I know exactly what I'm signing. This is my decision." Adriana's expression cracked for the first time. Her lawyer stammered, trying to pivot. Then came the journals, every word of them authenticated by handwriting experts. The truth was undeniable. Still, Adriana didn't back down. When she took the stand, she spun stories about how I distanced myself from the family to make them look bad. She cried on cue, painting herself as the devoted daughter who only wanted fairness. Watching her lie so effortlessly made something inside me harden. I had once pitied her. Now I simply saw a stranger wearing my last name. The trial dragged on for weeks. Each session chipped away at the illusion Adriana had built. Witness after witness confirmed the journal's accuracy, the bank transfers, the manipulation. Slowly, the tide turned. Even June, eventually subpoenaed to testify, told the truth. She admitted that Adriana had convinced her to lie to their father, to keep me away. Adriana glared at her through tears of fury, but June didn't flinch. By the final day, I felt drained but resolute. The judge took nearly an hour to deliberate. The entire courtroom was silent when he returned to deliver the verdict. He ruled in my favor. The will stood untouched. Adriana's claims were declared unfounded and malicious in intent. She was ordered to pay all court fees and damages for defamation. For a moment, I couldn't move. The sound of the gavel striking echoed like thunder in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was victory I felt or just relief that the storm was finally over. Adriana left the courtroom without looking back. June approached me slowly, tears in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded, but deep down, I knew something had ended long before this, our bond as sisters, our family as it once was. What was left were ashes, scattered and thin. Mr. Levin placed a hand on my shoulder. "He'd be proud," he said, softly. I smiled faintly. Maybe he'd just be relieved we're finally done fighting. Outside, reporters waited with cameras, shouting questions. I didn't stop to answer. I walked straight past them, into the sunlight, breathing in freedom like it was air after years underwater. That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the stars. My reflection looked older, steadier, like I'd lived 3 lives inside one. The house was quiet, and for the first time, the quiet didn't scare me. When the judge's gavel hit the desk, it wasn't victory I felt, it was release. Winning doesn't heal, it just stops the bleeding. After the lawsuit ended, I expected to feel triumphant, free, maybe even happy. But what I actually felt was nothing. The silence that followed victory was louder than all the arguments that came before it. The tension was gone, but so was the noise that had defined my life for so long. It's strange when you live in constant battle. Peace can feel like emptiness. Days turned into weeks. The Solano Foundation kept me busy. More women started coming for help, women abandoned by husbands, betrayed by families, cheated out of inheritance, silenced at work. Their stories were different from mine, yet painfully familiar. I listened to every one of them, offered advice where I could, and realized that my pain had a purpose after all. At night, though, the loneliness crept in. My father was gone. My sisters were strangers. The house was quiet except for the ticking of his old watch on the nightstand. Sometimes, I caught myself glancing at the phone, half expecting it to light up with a message from Adriana, maybe even an apology. It never did. Instead, one afternoon, I got a text from June. "Can I visit?" she asked. When she arrived, she looked different, calmer, lighter, like she'd stopped living in someone else's shadow. We sat in the garden where my mother used to plant the roses. For a while, we didn't speak. Then June whispered, "I told the truth in court because it was the only thing I could still give him." I looked at her, and she smiled weakly. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it for Dad. He deserved to rest without lies hanging over him." "I know," I said softly. "But thank you anyway." Her eyes filled with tears. "I miss him. I miss when we were kids, before all this." "Me too," I admitted, "but we can't go back." She nodded, staring at the ground. "I don't think Adriana will ever forgive me for testifying. She hasn't spoken to me since." "Then maybe that's her punishment," I said gently, carrying bitterness while the rest of us learned to let go. We spent hours talking that day about childhood memories, about our mother, about the things we wished we'd said sooner. By sunset, something in me felt lighter. We weren't sisters in the way we used to be, but we weren't enemies anymore either. Over the following months, the foundation grew. Godwin helped me secure grants, and volunteers started joining. We opened a small legal clinic 2 towns over. Women began sending letters of gratitude, handwritten notes about how our work had changed their lives. Every time I read one, I felt my father's presence, as if he was watching me from somewhere, proud and quiet. Still, healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, I'd wake up from dreams where my family was whole again, only to remember that it never really was. I began therapy, something I'd avoided for years. Talking about my past, my mother's death, my father's silence, My sister's cruelty felt like peeling layers off an old wound. But little by little, the pain stopped bleeding. One day, I found myself walking through a small market downtown. I passed a stall selling old vinyl records, and for some reason, one album caught my eye, my father's favorite jazz musician. I bought it, dear. It went home, and played it on the dusty record player I'd found in his study. The music filled the house like sunlight. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just smiled. A few weeks later, June came by again, bringing lunch and laughter. She helped me repaint the office walls. She started volunteering part-time at the foundation, helping new clients with paperwork. Watching her slowly rebuild her life reminded me of how far we'd both come from that night at the dinner table, the night they called me a burden. Sometimes we'd talk about Adriana. We both wondered where she was, what she was doing, whether she ever regretted anything. Rumors said she'd sold her jewelry, her car, even her house. But I never felt satisfaction in that. Pity, maybe, mostly sadness. One evening, as June was leaving, she handed me a small box. "This came in the mail," she said. "It was addressed to the foundation, but it's for you." Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small key. The note was written in unfamiliar handwriting. "Your father left something unfinished. Mr. Levin asked me to deliver it when the time was right. Come to the notary's office when you're ready." My pulse quickened. What could possibly be left? The estate was settled, the letters read, the will closed. I stared at the key for a long moment. Something deep inside me stirred curiosity, dread, maybe both. That night, I sat in my father's old study, the key on the desk beside his photograph. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. I picked up the key, turning it over in my palm. I didn't know what it unlocked, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever it was, it would bring me closer to the truth I thought I already knew. Then, one unexpected visitor brought a final message from my father I never knew existed. He spoke to me one last time from beyond the grave. The following morning, I went straight to Mr. Levin's office, the small key burning in my pocket the entire way there. When I arrived, he greeted me with the same gentle professionalism as always, but there was something different in his eyes, a quiet knowing. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "What's this about?" I asked, handing him the note and the key. He smiled faintly. "Your father left something with me, something he asked I give you only when I felt you were ready to hear it." "Ready?" I echoed, confused. "For what?" He opened a drawer and placed a small, dusty cassette tape on the table. The label on it simply read, "For Maria." I stared at it, my breath catching. "He recorded something?" Mr. Levin nodded. "About a month before he passed. He said it was important that you heard it in your own time, not in a room full of people." My heart thudded in my chest. "What's on it?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "He sealed it himself. But if you'd like, I can play it here. The tape deck's in the back." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to grab it and run to listen in private, where my tears could fall freely. But another part of me wanted a witness. Someone who could tell me later that it had really happened. "Here is fine," I said softly. Mr. Levin disappeared into the back room and returned with a small tape player. He placed the cassette inside, pressed play, and stepped back. For a moment, there was only static, a soft, crackling sound like rain. Then my father's voice filled the room. "Maria, my sweet girl, if you're hearing this, then my time has come." And I couldn't say what I needed to while I still had the strength. I was never good with words, but I want to try now. My eyes filled instantly. The sound of his voice, fragile yet unmistakably his, made the room spin. "I was hard on you, too hard. I thought being quiet meant being strong. I thought letting things go meant keeping peace. But all I did was teach you that silence was your place, and I was wrong. You deserved better from me." I covered my mouth, sobbing quietly as the tape continued. "You were the only one who saw me for who I was, not the provider, not the father figure, but the man. You forgave me long before I asked for it. I saw it in your eyes that last time you visited. You didn't know it, but that day, you saved me from dying with bitterness in my heart." Mr. Levin discreetly turned away, giving me privacy. I pressed my hands to my chest, trying to steady the ache in my ribs. "Adriana and June, I love them too, but I let them believe that money could replace love. I gave them too much, and in doing so, I took something from you. I can't undo that. But I can make sure you never feel small again. That's why I left you everything. Not as a gift, as an apology." The tape clicked for a second, then continued, his voice breaking slightly. "If you ever doubt your worth, remember this. You're not strong because of what you endured. You're strong because you never let it make you cruel. That's your mother in you. She'd be proud." I wiped my eyes, but the tears wouldn't stop. Don't waste your life trying to make them understand you. Some people only see what fits their comfort. Live for yourself now. Build something good. And when you do, know that I'll be with you every time you choose kindness over anger, every time you open your heart instead of closing it." The final pause felt endless. Then, softly, he said, "Inheritance is not money, my girl. It's peace of conscience. That's what I'm giving you. Be free, Mireia." The tape clicked again and fell silent. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the little cassette player. The silence it left behind was unbearable. I wanted to rewind it, to hear him again, to keep his voice alive a little longer, but I didn't. Instead, I placed my hand over the tape and whispered, "I hear you, Dad. I finally hear you." Mr. Levin said nothing. He simply handed me a small envelope. "He also left this with the tape," he said. Inside was a single photograph, the three of us, standing in front of the house when I was little. My father had written on the back, "We all lose our way sometimes, but you found it for us." That night, I brought the tape home. I didn't have a proper player, so I borrowed one from the community center. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the faint smell of my father's cologne that still lingered on the old furniture. I played it again, letting his words fill the house like a benediction. When it ended, I placed the cassette in his desk drawer beside his journals and locked it with the same key that had led me to it. It wasn't just a recording anymore, it was proof that forgiveness could reach beyond death. The next morning, I told June about it. She cried as she listened to a short part I played for her, her shoulders shaking. "He really did love you," she said through tears. "He loved all of us, we just didn't know how to see it." Maybe she was right. Maybe love had been there all along, buried under pride, silence, and mistakes. That evening, I stood by the window, watching the sunset melt into the horizon. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. My father's voice still echoed softly in my heart, steady and kind. That night, I stood in the same hallway. They once called me a burden and smiled. They once called me a burden. Now, I am the legacy they'll never erase. It's been 3 years since that day I played my father's final message. 3 years since the last gavel fell, since the lies crumbled, since I stopped defining myself through pain. The Solano Foundation has grown beyond anything I ever imagined. We now have 3 branches across the state, each helping women find legal aid, housing, and confidence after betrayal. I walk through those doors and see their faces frightened but hopeful. I see myself in every one of them. I start each morning early, with coffee on the porch and the sound of the city waking up. The house that once suffocated me now feels alive again, filled with laughter, light, and purpose. The walls that held my father's silence now echo with women's voices sharing their stories, their victories, their second chances. June is still by my side. She manages one of the offices now, calmer and stronger than I've ever seen her. Sometimes, we joke that it took losing everything to find each other again. We talk about Dad often, not with tears anymore, but with gratitude. "He finally made peace," she said once. And so did we. Adriana never reached out again. I hear things, whispers that she moved to another city, changed her last name, started over. Part of me still wishes she'd call one day, even just to yell, because silence feels like a wound that never fully closes. But I've learned to stop chasing apologies. Some people have to find redemption on their own timeline, and some never do. Instead, I honor my father's memory in ways he would have understood quietly, through action. Each year, on his birthday, I give out scholarships in his name to women studying law or social work. I call it the Hector Solano Grant for Second Chances. When I present the award, I tell them something I learned the hard way. You are never too small to matter. One afternoon, as I was locking up the office, a woman in her 50s stopped me. She'd come to the foundation months ago after her husband drained their joint accounts and left. Now, she had her own small business and an apartment. She hugged me and whispered, "You saved my life." I smiled, shaking my head. "No," I told her. "You saved your own." I just showed you where the door was. Those moments are what I live for now. They make every sleepless night, every tear, every cruel word worth it. Because I didn't just survive my story, I rewrote it. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about carrying your scars with pride. They remind you of who you were before the world told you who to be. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I walk down to the beach a few miles from the house. The sea has become my favorite sound, calm but powerful, endless but forgiving. I stand there, barefoot in the sand, watching the waves roll in and thinking about everything that's happened. My past no longer feels like an anchor. It feels like the foundation beneath my feet. A few months ago, I met someone new. His name is Daniel. He's a volunteer lawyer who started helping at the foundation. He's kind, patient, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. When he first asked me out, I hesitated. Love, for me, had always meant giving too much and receiving too little. But he never asked for pieces of me. He met me as a whole. One evening, as we walked by the shore, he said, "You talk about your father like he's still here." I smiled. Maybe he is. Maybe he never left. He reached for my hand, and for once, I didn't pull away. I realized that love didn't have to be about survival anymore. It could be gentle. It could be home. Last week, I finally decided to sell the mansion. It was beautiful, but it was also full of ghosts, memories of things said and unsaid. The sale went smoothly, and I used part of the money to buy a small house by the sea, not far from where I go to think. It's modest, with peeling paint and a garden full of wildflowers. But when I stand on the porch and breathe in the salt air, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of everything I've overcome. Before I moved out, I walked through every room one last time. The study, where I found the journals. The hallway, where my father once called me to dinner. The kitchen, where Adriana and June used to laugh at my expense. I touched the walls and whispered, "We're free now." I packed the journals and the cassette tape carefully into a wooden box, the same one my father used to store family photos. I keep it in my new house, not as a reminder of pain, but of truth, of how far love can reach when it's finally spoken. Now, when people ask about my story, about how I went from the burden to a woman with her own legacy, I tell them it wasn't luck. It was choice. The choice to stop waiting for someone else to rescue me. The choice to forgive without forgetting. The choice to rise when I had every reason to stay down. Every scar, every heartbreak, every betrayal, they didn't break me. They shaped me. My father used to say that inheritance is peace of conscience. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. My peace came not from the house, or the money, or the foundation, but from knowing I became everything they said I couldn't be. As I sit on my porch now, watching the sky turn orange over the waves, I think about the woman I used to be, scared, silenced, waiting for permission to exist. I want to tell her that she made it, that every tear was worth it, that she was never a burden, only a seed waiting to grow in her own time. They called me a burden, but it turns out, I was the blessing they never deserved.